Well, welcome back to another Coffee and a Chat Survival Saturday edition. Haven't had one of these in a while, and I don't know. We'll see. They may be popping up a little more in the future as things go. So I do have something I want to address today that's a little different. It's not like this hands-on skill or a tool you need to have or anything like that. Well, it is kind of a tool you need to have, but it's more about this right here. And that's dealing with that sense of fear. So how do I deal with fear? Now, this is an important one for me, okay? I have been controlled by fear the majority of my life. It started when I was little. There were some abusive people in my life. I just seem to be a magnet to abusive people. And they used fear so much in how they controlled me and kept me silent and all the different things they needed. When they needed something from me, they used fear to get it. And so I was really groomed by fear, and I have had great fear. Another one was self-condemnation, blame being placed on me for every, things they would do as adults, and then put the blame on me as a child. And I want to, again, clarify, as I do in most of these videos, is that my parents were not the abusive people. I had the most amazing, wonderful parents. Unfortunately, as happens a lot, as parents, sometimes we think there are people we can trust with our children, and we learn that that's not the case. Not everybody that seems okay or safe or wonderful really is. And sorting out who's the good guys and who's the bad guys can be a little tricky. So in my parents' defense, I will say they didn't know always who the bad guy was. So there were times when they thought that they had left me in a safe situation, and they hadn't. And so anyway, so there was this whole abuse thing that went on growing up. And then when I got married, I married really young, and I love my first husband very much. I really did love him. And I don't know if he loved me or not, because he told me one time he didn't think he ever loved anybody but himself. He didn't think that he was capable of loving anyone by himself but himself. And I will say that when he said it, he wasn't being mean or anything. It was just like an observation he was making. And that was about 6 years before he left me. But when he said that, it was one of those moments that was kind of like, this might be one of the most honest things he's ever said. And so that was kind of huge. I, at the time, was hoping that this acknowledgement meant that there was a change coming. Unfortunately, that was not the case. So, he had his problems and stuff, but he was, as much as I loved him and believed he could be something more than what he was a very abusive man, sometimes in a very covert way. And so the pain of my childhood just continued on through that marriage. And we were married for over 36 years. And so there was a lot of damage done by that. And so it's just been the last, 12 years or so that I've been away from that. And the Lord's been able to do a work in me of healing and setting me free, and it's an ongoing process. So this fear thing, it does not control me as much as it did up to, 10 or 12 years ago, but it still pops up. The false sense of guilt still pops up. And so I still have to be very careful in battling it. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that today, because I know I'm not alone. I know, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that have these same struggles. And even if you didn't grow up in a situation where fear was used against you and to control you, the world we live in uses fear to try to manipulate and control us, okay? And I'm beginning to see that more and more. And so I wanted to talk about that for a few minutes this morning, because I believe that the thing of fear being used to control the human race it's way bigger now than what it was when I was younger. And I think it's going to continue to grow. And so for those that have ears to hear and eyes to see, I hope you get this, because if we can grasp hold to what's going on around us and not let it take hold of us, we'll do better. So I want to start with this is, in my life, I have had to deal with lawyers and doctors, among other people. But the two things about lawyers and doctors that I've noticed is they have this wonderful ability to give you even a false sense of hope. The sense of hope they give you such confidence that I remember, walking into a thing with a lawyer and he's like, oh yeah, this is in the bag, no problem, blah, 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 blah. This could never happen, that could never happen, and it's going to, and all the things that he said could never happen are exactly what happened, and it didn't go the way he said. But the Lord already had prepared me, so it was okay. I was all right through it. But they do have this knack of where you feel like, oh yeah, well, I got this thing now. It's not a problem. And doctors, I've seen them do the same thing. Well, all you got to do is we're going to give you this medication and we're going to do this surgical procedure and everything's going to be just great. And that's not always true. My mom, if she was still living, she has had a great testimony on that. She had totally destroyed her back. Especially when her mom was ill. My mom was about my age now when she was taking care of her mother and having to lift her and everything. And my grandmother wasn't a big woman or anything, but it was dead weight. And even a child that's just dead body weight, that can't help you, is a lot to handle. And then put on being older when you're doing it, it's not easy. So her having to lift and do all these different things. My mom was a very tiny little woman. She wasn't even 5 foot tall by the time she passed away because she had shrunk quite a bit. But at her tallest ever, I believe she was 5'2", was the absolute, and that might have been with shoes on. Poor thing. She always wanted to be taller, and the ones that were too tall always wanted to be shorter, and I don't know. So anyway, but my mother, she met with, they figured out, that her back was toast, sent her to a specialist. And when she met with the specialist, because she was not feeling much hope, she was in so much pain and so limited in what she could do. But then she meets with the specialist. Oh, simple procedure. We do it all the time. Okay, so first we're going to give you this medication. This is going to help with the pain and the inflammation and all of that. And then we're going to go in and we're going to do this surgical procedure and we're going to do this, this, and this to your spine. And like I said, we do it all the time. Piece of cake, it'll be a little bit of recovery, but then you're going to be good as new. And so she was like, okay, this is great. All right, let's do it. Yeah, it failed. And she was worse than she had been before the surgery. And the medication did not help make everything all better. In fact, over time, the medication almost killed her more than once. But they talked her into, well, what we need to do is this surgery. Anyway, she went through 8 or 9 back surgeries, every time with them giving her this great confidence that this was going to fix it. But every single one of those back surgeries failed. And my mother lived out the rest of her days in pain, with mobility issues and sleep issues, gastrointestinal issues. She already had some of that, but problems with the spine actually made some of that worse. And she wasn't a complainer, and she didn't ever allow us to use the word suffering about her, because she didn't suffer. Other people suffered, but she wasn't suffering. It could be so much worse. And it was a great difficulty for her. And she did suffer. whether she wanted us to say that or not. And she knew she did. But bless her heart, my mom was not going to be the problem. She wanted to be the solution. She wanted to take care of people, not have people take care of her. And yet we don't always get what we want. So we went through all of that with her, and right up till the day she died. In fact, when she started having some real serious pain from the cancer she had, we didn't know she had cancer, but she started having this really bad pain. But because it was by her back, on her back, by the spine, that's what everybody assumed it was. And because there was always something like that. And so I don't know if she hadn't had all the back issues, they maybe would have found that sooner, but would it have made a difference? I don't know. It might have made things worse. But I know that by the time that she was diagnosed with cancer, and, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to do these treatments, and, and you're going to be better. And, when I'm talking to the doctor, not in front of her, then he's like, if we're lucky, we'll get you 3 to 6 months with your mom. I'm like, so, it's not like they were going to cure her or anything. They just thought maybe they could alleviate some of this stuff. And so, I just wanted them to be honest with her, because I want people to be honest with me. And my mom and I are very much alike in that. We do better if you go ahead and give us the facts and we know what we're really dealing with. We don't like being lied to or sugar-coated or misled. Not at all. And so, they started telling her, they didn't say, here's your options. They started saying, here's what we're going to do. And I remember when this doctor got done, my mom looked at me and she said, I don't want to do that. I just want to go home. Can we just take me home and I live out the whatever days the Lord's given me and just live them out as they are? And I'm like, yeah, you absolutely can. And the doctor's like, well, we wouldn't advise it, but so that was the choice my mom made, and I would have supported her either way, but I'll tell you, I had greater peace about that. And so she came home on hospice, and we were able to keep her comfortable, and she had 30 days. But they were 30 wonderful days where she was bedridden. She couldn't walk anymore. But we could sit and talk about things and share. And I wouldn't trade those last 30 days for anything. They were wonderful. And she, we were able to get her pain under control so that she was comfortable. And, once we did that, it was good. So, just as much, and I'm sharing this because just as much as somebody can give us that false sense of hope, they can also give you a false sense of fear. And I see that a lot with commercials and the media especially. There are things that when I was growing up in nutrition, that they told us things that were good for us, like eating an egg, a whole egg, yolk and white, was so good for you, excellent source of protein, easily digestible, and it was rave reviews. And then we ate lots of eggs. I came from parents who, some of them had farmers in their background. My dad's side of the family, they were all farmers and missionaries, and they ate lots of eggs and never had issues from them. But then by the time I was a teenager, you shouldn't, if you're going to eat an egg, only eat the white because the yolk's bad for you. And then they start, you're going to get, up your cholesterol. It will do this, it will do that. You're going to have heart disease. And, and then we're terrified to eat eggs. And now we're back to where more and more they're like, no, the whole egg's good for you. But of course it doesn't matter now because we got these issues with why we don't have any eggs, and where there are eggs, they're so expensive. Oh my word. Yeah. That's one thing I watch when I do go to the grocery store. I'm watching the price of eggs going, oh my word. So we ration out eggs at our house for sure. And I've been looking for everything I can do as an egg substitute in baking and whatnot. So we don't need very many eggs, because coming by them or being able to afford them is a little challenging. But anyway, eggs were good for us and they weren't good for us. Now they're good for us again. Pork's another one. Oh, it was it was bad for you. Then it was the other white meat and you should eat it. And then no, you shouldn't eat it. And then, and back and forth. And, and as I grew older and matured and began to understand things, I started going, really, I don't think it has anything to do with whether it's good for us or not. It's what they're trying to sell us. And, like we went through the whole thing, you should never drink tap water. You should get bottled water. But then we find out that the bottled water is more contaminated than the tap water, and they started doing studies on that. And that's a lot of it, there was this one brand that my first husband loved. So we always had to buy this particular bottled water. Well, it claimed to be, coming from a sweet, fresh spring, that it was sweet, fresh water. And then it turns out they get exposed that they were was in a warehouse somewhere where they were turning on the faucet, that filled the bottles, it was regular water that was piped in to fill these bottles and then sealed up and sent out for sale as fresh spring water. And so they got in some trouble for that because it was false advertising. But then when they did the study of the most contaminated water, we were watching the study, when they released it on the news, and that water my husband loved so much was the most contaminated, the worst, most unhealthy. And at that time we lived out in the country. We were on a well, and we used to, where we lived there, you had to get your well water tested. So once a year or once every 2 years, I don't remember. Anyway, the health department would come out and take samples. And we did one time, we had some kind of an algae that was in it. And so we had to shock our well and kill off the algae. And it wasn't that big a deal. And then have the water retested and stuff. But our water was actually very good water. And so, but they were telling us, the bottled water companies were trying to tell us, no, that's not good for you. You don't want that. And, if you're on a well, you can have all these, I remember the old commercials, these different contaminants that are in there and amoebas and stuff. And if you're on city water, then you've got all these things added to it in the water treatment place. And yet that's exactly what they were bottling and selling. So fear is used a lot to control us in the media. There's a lot of fear there, that this is going to happen or that's going to happen, that, are we in World War III or is it coming? And, and all this stuff. And, whatever the case, I can sometimes feel that kind of overwhelming fear thing rise up in me. And I tell you, fear for me, when it starts taking hold, it'll paralyze me. And it makes it so I can't even function. And so as I began to recognize that, you're going to hear some dogs probably in the background. It's okay. I got a couple of dogs I got one in the room with me and a couple on the other side of the wall. And somebody, I'm hearing somebody talking. They must hear somebody moving around out there and they're wanting to go do something. But anyway, so if you do, it's okay. Ignore it. And if you're a dog person, you'll be fine with it. So anyhow, when fear starts to take hold, and that, like right now when I'm making this video, it's the time of year where there's all kinds of viruses and stuff floating around. I mean, this head cold is a virus and things that we're having to deal with. And I know people that are so fearful of, that they become germaphobes because they're so afraid that whatever they get is going to kill them. And I will say that things do seem to hang on longer than they used to. It seems a little more difficult to kick it and get rid of it. And I was talking with my one daughter about it the other day, and she even agreed with me because I'm like going, it feels kind of weird to me. Why has it gotten to be such a problem? And she's like, But anyway, me and my maybe I just overthink it all. I don't think so. Okay, so anyway, we have all this stuff that's always there. We've got wildfires that are burning down states. We've got, we go through hurricanes and tornadoes, plane crashes. I mean, there's just stuff happening all the time. And with, easy access to the news, it's all around us, and we're hearing about all this stuff. And I'm not saying that we should just turn a blind eye. I'm not saying that. But I found for myself that sometimes I just have to give myself a break. Take a day that, you know what, I'm not going to watch any news today. I'm not going to go on social media and because it pops up there, or check my news feed. I'm not going to, I just have to give myself a break, and I need to be good at that. And then the times when it does pop up, when those things are there and I feel that fear, is for me because I have faith in Jesus Christ. So there's my hope, and it's not a false sense of hope. It is true hope. So I have to remind myself that ultimately God is in control, and that we're going to be okay. I did see this short from an interview that someone did with Ben Carson's, and he was talking about George Washington, and he told a story about how George Washington had, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 horses shot out from under him. It was before he was president, and he was serving this general, and he had these horses shot out from him. He had bullet holes in his jacket, but no flesh wounds. He had shrapnel in his hair, but no flesh wounds. And, and how he went through where other people weren't. And so this was, part of this was warring with Native Americans. And so this elderly chief years later, this one chief had become elderly. George Washington was in the area. I'm hopefully telling this story right. And the chief asked to see this man. He wanted to see this white man. And so he said, I want you to know, when he met George Washington, that I'm an excellent marksman. And I shot you 17 times, but you never were shot. And even the guys with me, I told them to quit shooting at you. It was wasting ammunition, because no matter how many times we shot you, we couldn't shoot you. And, so it's just, this story is that he saw him. He goes, before I die, I wanted to meet the man who is protected by the great creator of the universe, or whatever he called God. But it was this, this miraculous story. And this, what Carson's was saying is that this story used to be in all our textbooks. And actually, when he was telling the story, it's like, I kind of remember that story. Not as detailed as he does, but I do remember that, Washington had gone through this stuff where he'd been shot at all these times, and yet nobody ever hit him, and it made no sense. And so the only acknowledgement was that God protected him. And so Carson's claimed that this was taken out of the textbooks when it was no longer politically correct. And the guy interviewing him says, "What's not politically correct about that?" And he goes, "God?" And I'm like going, oh my word. I don't know. For me, it was a precious moment, because I totally get that. And so when I was listening to that, I started thinking, I started talking to the Lord. I'm like, you know what? See, we forget sometimes that you've got a plan. You've got a plan for our lives. And if you're not done with it, see, Washington hadn't become president yet. And that was definitely one of the things that he yet, was ordained for him to do, because all leaders are put in place, good and bad, by God for the will of God. So, that's what the Bible tells us. So if that's true, and I believe the Bible is, then he had to live. He couldn't be taken out because he hadn't got to that point of that divine appointment. And who knows what other things there may have been. Now, was George Washington a totally great guy, perfect and wonderful? No. We've got other stories about him that aren't so great. But good or bad, there is a plan. And each one of us, I don't believe anybody is born to just take up space on the planet. I believe there's a purpose for each one of our lives, and that means you. There is a purpose for your life. I know I have got lots of stories of times that I should have been taken out. I should have died, and I didn't. And I hold to, well, and I know some people hate it when you say, well, God's not done with you yet. That's all that shows. You haven't completed the assignment yet that God has for you. There's still more. And a lot of people don't like that. But whether they like it or not, my experience is that that's very true. And I'm nobody. I'm just some little old woman in the first state of the Union, in the second to the smallest state of the United States of America. And I'm not even from here, but God planted me over here. I mean, I'm not anybody. My husband's not this. I mean, he's known in the area where we live because he's an amazing man. But I mean, we're not famous. We're not important in the big picture. There's so many things that could be against us, that could count against us. But yet we're still here because Marvin, he's got stories. Let me tell you. That man should have died a million times over a long time ago, including when he was born, because he was born with pneumonia. And just before he was born, before him, he had an older brother that was born with pneumonia and didn't live. And so when Marvin was born with pneumonia, of course, his mom was very protective and panicked about that. But right at his death, or at his birth, there was a death sentence on him. At my birth, there was a death sentence on me. I should not have survived my birth. I should not have survived my mom's pregnancy with me. There were so many things against me, and yet the Lord protected me. And even the things that were used to protect me, like they used a medication to try and stop my mom from losing the pregnancy with me. Okay. And then, sang all the praises because she was able to carry me to term and I was alive. But that medication that they used caused me to get cancer later on. 20 years later, I was dealing with cancer, and a very aggressive cancer. Whenever something would get under control, it would pop up somewhere else, and it looked very hopeless. And then got to a point where I was going through oral chemotherapy for the cancer I had at the time, and I had a very bad reaction. And by this point, I was I in my 30s or close to being in my 30s. I was close to my 30s, and I couldn't take the medication anymore. And at this point, my doctor didn't know what else he could do, but he was a Christian, and I miss him. He was a great doctor. But he was like, well, I guess we trust God is what we do now. And I'm like, okay. And, I'm good with that. And God healed me. And I had, after that, I think one little episode with cancer, but they found it after they had done surgery. It was contained in what they had removed out of my body. So it wasn't even, they didn't even look at it as being a risk. And so, because it was just in the beginning stages and stuff. And it was, like I said, it was contained and nobody cut through it or anything like that. So there was no reason for it to spread. Whatever. To my knowledge, I've been cancer-free since. And of course, it's not like I'm going to the doctor to find out. A whole other story. But there have been so many times, car wrecks, so many things. Some of the stories I've told here, go back and look at my old videos. There's some great stories, and they're all true. So I know that God has had a hand of protection on me. So much so that I feel sometimes like I'm not like everybody else. Like there's something different about me, and that God is protecting me and saving me for something and I'm getting older all the time. Like what else how could he possibly use me? Because sometimes you find as you get older, I would think people would be like, oh, you have wisdom. And some people are that way. But a lot of people are like, oh, you're just an old woman. What do you know? And yet God uses me in some surprising ways. He's used me in some people's lives, some young people's lives. I'm like, how in the world did you do that, God? Why would they even be interested in what I had to say? Why would they care? Why would they come to me? Because it's like oil and water. It won't mix and it doesn't make sense. But yet God knows things we don't know. And everybody's life matters. And sometimes the very thing in you that's going to speak out the most to another person is what you've been through in life and how God brought you through it and where you are today. Because sometimes the greatest hope we find is in another person's survival and knowing that, okay, if God could do that for them, he can do it for us. The other day, Marvin and I were faced with something, and we were talking, and the fear of the potential that we could lose our home came up in this because of certain things, certain events that if they were to play out a certain way, we could end up losing our home. And because we wouldn't be able to afford it. And, and it put like a sense of fear in me for a moment. And then I said, but Marvin, look at all the things God's brought us through. I don't know if I've told this story or not. If I haven't, I will one day. And even if I have, I'll probably retell it one day because it's such a great story. But we had 2 mortgages on our place. And it was a struggle to pay the 2 mortgages. And then we got a letter in the mail from the second mortgage company letting us know that they'd forgiven that mortgage and that we no longer owed anything on it. We would have to claim the part that was forgiven as income, and we would have to pay some kind of tax on that, but we did not have to pay the rest of that mortgage back. And that there was nothing we needed to do, just receive. And I remember when I'm reading this letter, I'm like, this is salvation. Jesus has already paid the price for my sins. He already died in my place, rose from the grave victorious over death. And there's nothing I have to do because he's already done it. I just have to receive it, accept what he's done for me. Take the gift he's given me and take possession of it. I don't even have to pay tax on my salvation. So I was just like, why would God do that? Because that one still baffles us to this day. Why they did it. I don't know why they did it. Nobody has an answer for us. Just that they did it. And that was years ago. And it's for real. That really was forgiven. That really was, I've never even heard of that happening. But evidently it does. There's so many that they do. And so I just, so why would God forgive that second mortgage to help us stay in our home if he's just going to take it away now over something stupid? And then there's been a few other things where, that have happened, and God has blessed us and taken care of it to keep us right here in our home. So am I going to get caught up in the circumstances, not even the what is, but the what could be, and let the fear of that control me? Or I'm going to hang on to what I already know, and that's what God's already done. Because there's been other things God's done that has protected us from ever losing this place. So, and it's even, then we got to go to, it's not even our place. It belongs to the Lord. So it's his call anyway. But I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to fear. I need to remind myself of the truth of what I know, what God has already showed me, what he's already taught me. And so this fear thing, when we, went through, especially 2020 with the pandemic, and so many things that changed and all, fear was a huge thing. And a lot of people were really overwhelmed with that. And I remember too, I'll tell you, partway through the pandemic, Marvin and I got really, really sick, and we were down for a month. And it was just like a flu that we had had a few years before. And I'm pretty sure that's what it was, okay? But people kept wanting us to go get tested to see. Okay, so God began to deal with my heart on this one. And I was like, I don't want to get tested. Number one, there was no reason to. We're staying isolated in the home. We're not around anybody, so we're not exposing anyone. We are doing everything we can to take care of ourselves. And we don't need to go to the hospital or anything like that. We're getting through this. I mean, we were sick, but we didn't need to go to a hospital or anything. And there was no reason. What difference would it make if that test came up positive or negative? There's only one difference that it would have made in me, is if that came up positive, it would have put a sense of spirit, or a spirit of fear, a sense of fear in me. And I would not have done as well. But just trusting God to tell us what to do and letting him provide for us and take care of us, which he did, and he did a beautiful job at it. That's what mattered. So for me, I had to choose not to go take an extra step that wasn't necessary. Because whether it was positive or negative, I wasn't going to be around anybody until I was well. Because I'm not even going out there trying to give people my head cold, okay? I stayed in until I knew my fever was gone and everything. I knew I wasn't contagious anymore. And even then, I've still stayed in. There's been a couple of times that I had to go out because there were a couple things where I had to be present on something. And, and I masked up and everything to, just every precaution I could to make sure that I would protect anybody else. And I kept my distance, and I let people know. I'm fine. I've had this horrible head cold, and I still don't sound good or feel the greatest, but I am getting better. I don't think I'm contagious, but I don't want to take any risk. Well, nobody else wants to take a risk either, so we're all good. So, I've tried to remain responsible, but there just was no reason for me to do the other than run the risk of getting that fearfulness in me. And then I would have been even sicker. Because it would not have done a good thing in me. So how do I deal with fear? Sometimes I just have to quit listening to the other stuff. Sometimes I have to know that when they're saying, I remember, all the stuff about cholesterol. Don't eat animal meat. Don't eat animal fat because cholesterol will give you heart disease because it will mess up your cholesterol. And then finding the studies on it that it's not the cholesterol and those things that was causing the problem at all. It was sugar that was causing people's cholesterol to be out of whack. So I need to be more careful about the ice cream or the cookies than I do about a piece of chicken when it comes to that, or an egg. So knowing that sometimes people are saying things because they're trying to sell a product, or trying to distract me and have me look over here and be worried about that when I should be looking over there, because that's where the real action that matters is going on. So not just buying into all that stuff, reminding myself that just as my lawyer and just as my doctor have given me false sense of hope, these advertisers, this media can give me a false sense of fear too. And that it doesn't really matter, because whatever is going on, either way, it doesn't change where I'm going to be, because I'm going to just trust God in this and listen to him and follow his guidance and just cause me to hug in closer to him. That's all. When that fear wants to come up, then I know, okay, I just need to hug in closer to God so that I know I'm hearing from him and I'm listening to him, because that's where my true hope is. That's what really matters. That's what it's all about. So that's I know it's a long one today, but there's so much with this fear, and there's some people I believe will watch this all the way to the end because you're battling that. And I'm just telling you, don't be listening to all those voices out there. Okay? I mean, we can keep informed and stuff without being overwhelmed with it. So limit it. But hug in to Jesus Christ, because not only does he know the truth of what's going on, he's got a plan. And that's the plan I'm interested in. I want to be where he wants me to be. I want to do what he wants me to do. I want to say what he tells me to say. I want to see the things he's wanting me to see. Okay? So I'm just in the word more. I'm just going to pray more. And I'm going to trust Jesus. And I'm going to remind myself, when that fear wants to overcome, I'm going to remind myself of what God's already done in my life to prove that I can trust him. Because even if there's something horrible coming and it's the one that's going to take me out, it's okay. Because when I go, I'm going to be with him. And it ain't nothing, just like the story of George Washington. Isn't any way anybody's going to take me out when it's not my time to go, when God's still got something for me to do. So the bullets can come right at me and put a hole in my clothes, but they will not put a hole in my flesh. There you go. I want to surround myself not with positivity, because I almost feel like positivity is being worshipped now. But I want to surround myself with truth. And the truth is, God is bigger than anything and everything that surrounds me. All right. With that, I'm going to have some more coffee in my good trusty old cup that's not pretty, but it holds a lot of coffee, and it was clean. I'm going to enjoy my coffee, spend some more time with the Lord, and because he's talking to me. He's telling me there are some changes that need to come in my life, and I had a talk with my husband and my grandson today because I need them to be on board too and to support me in these changes. Because sometimes when changes happen and you live with other people, your changes affect them too. And so I just need to make sure we're all good, and I got the green light from both of them. So I'm going to try and make some major changes in my life according to the things God's telling me to do. And, if you like this video at all, even just a little part of it, would you hit the like button? Because the more likes it gets, the more likely it is to get out there in the algorithm, which is, I guess, whatever thing that makes it available for more people to see. Because I want to spread the word of hope in Jesus Christ as much as I can before my last breath comes, okay? So you can help me do that. You can help by, if you're not subscribed and you've watched more than one video, why not subscribe? Because that helps too. So the subscribing, hitting the like button, and leaving comments, all three of those things help get the word out more. And if you want to talk to me on a more personal level, if you click on the description of this video, on your phone, I think it says see more or whatever after it's kind of gives you the title. Anyway, if you click on that, you will find my email address, which is eagleswingcounseling@gmail.com. Correct spelling is in the description. And if you want to write a letter to me, which I'm always asking for those, I can't tell you how much it encourages me or how much joy I get. That is like the ultimate. It's when I get an actual letter, but it's Angie Tunnell, P.O. Box 21, Harbeson, Delaware 19951. Again, all the correct spelling and everything should be in the description. And I would love to hear from you. And if you need prayer, drop it in the comments, send me an email, drop me a letter. I promise, whenever somebody asks me to pray for them, I will pray for a minimum of 40 days. And I truly do. All right. I love you guys. You have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you later.